Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Ari, and today we're going to have some more stories about our toxic life. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video, if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now without further ado, let's go. Today's first story. In this story, a married couple in their mid-20s faces financial strain due to debt and job struggles. The wife secretly sells her car to pay bills, but then confesses tearfully to her husband. He discovers her infidelity on a security camera. After a painful divorce, he rebuilds his life in another state, finding genuine love. The experience highlights betrayal, resilience, and the pursuit of happiness beyond heartbreak. Now let's get into the story. At the time of this story, my wife was 26 and I was 25. We were getting along fine, married for 3 years, together for 6. Ironically, one of the things that attracted me to her the most was her maturity. She usually thought through any big life decisions very carefully, like what college she went to, haircuts she tried, and most importantly, when she wanted to have kids. Her parents raised her to think things through, but they were never very good with money. Her grandmother was the one to put her through college. So in her 3rd year of marriage, we had debt for my schooling and some of hers, and she still hadn't landed a job in her field. What she was working wasn't paying well at all, so a lot of the strain was on me. I could tell she felt bad, but I didn't know she was about to make a big decision without talking to me first. She decided to sell her car and met a potential buyer on a Monday while I was at work. He was very excited about it, but he couldn't drive it home until the weekend. So to reserve it, he paid her in full. Cash. She gave him a bill of sale, dated, signed, and notarized. However, she continued dragging the car, and I didn't realize she'd sold it. She mentioned over dinner that she really loved her car, and then she broke down into tears. That's when she explained it all to me and added that she'd spent half of his cash on our bills and debt payments. I was pretty upset with her, and I told her she'd probably have to sell her car to him since we couldn't pay him back his money. Her face was deflated, but accepted facts. She screwed up by selling a car she loved and needed, but she had to follow through now. I was at work on Saturday when my wife said the buyer was coming to get the car. She didn't respond to me while he was there, so that made me worry. I checked the live feed of our security camera out front. I only saw a guy, crew cut, standing in the driveway with the cars, but I rewound it a little and saw that the buyer had arrived with a crew cut to help drive the cars home. When my wife talked to him, it seemed like she was giving him bad news. He waved his arms around and rubbed his head like she was stressing him out. Just when it looked like he was threatening to sue her, she got him to quiet down and lean close to her so she could whisper something. She didn't know the camera and didn't record audio. Instantly, his face softened and he smiled. He looked so surprised and happy with whatever she said. He glanced at the camera as my wife took him by the hand and led him around to the back of the house where we didn't have cameras. Crew cut just waited awkwardly in the driveway for several minutes. I was already driving home furious. By the time I got there, the men and their car were gone. My wife's car was still there. She greeted me warmly as if everything was fine until she saw the anger in my eyes. I shoved past her to the backyard where I searched our patio furniture for any signs of foul play. Stuff looked moved around, but I couldn't find anything. I looked across the yard and noticed that our neighbor had a backyard camera that covered our yard too. I knocked on their door, and after hearing my story, they invited me in and requested me to come in. Covered the footage for me. They watched the video with me the first time, of my wife having intimate with the guy on the patio, just like I pictured. I walked towards my wife, standing helplessly worried in the backyard. She knew what I was doing and that our marriage could be over. As soon as I started playing her the video, she dropped her knees. She didn't want to see it and tried saying she was sorry over and over again, as if that would make it all go away. I told her I hated her for what she did to me. I started my life with her, accepting her past and life as my responsibility, and I managed to keep her safe and happy, only for her to end it all by sleeping with someone to pay off a debt. It was low and desperate, and she didn't need to do it. I told her to own up to her decision and follow through with selling the car. She went behind my back and lied more than once. My heart was broken. She told me she didn't see any other way out of it because she felt like she needed her car and his money. Then, she kind of bragged by saying she offered him half his money back, but he said her skills paid him back in full. I packed my stuff while she cried and talked about how our bills were paid, so I should be happy and forget anything happened. I want to stay with my coworker. It was awkward, and it made me feel lost. I had to find my packed toothbrush and toothpaste, and while digging through my bag of belongings, I found a pair of my wife's undies. It made me grieve for my loss. She fought me tooth and nail in court, even trying to claim that I was abusive, and she was desperate to fall in love again. It was nothing like what you'd expect a woman to say to a judge. Since she couldn't prove anything and I had her cheating on film, she was ordered to leave the house. I sold it and started my life over in a different state, where I was offered twice my previous salary for doing the same amount of work. I know I lucked out and most infidelity victims aren't so lucky, but I wanted people to know that even when I felt that heart pang at my wife's clothing mixed with mine, I didn't run back to her. I deserved a chance at genuine love with someone else, and I actually found it in my new home state of Connecticut. Today's second story. In this story, OP and his wife, high school sweethearts, were once inseparable. However, they faced challenges after college. Parenthood strained their relationship, and he discovered his wife's affair with his former bully. Hurt and enraged, he exposed her infidelity at their high school reunion. They divorced, and he vowed never to endure such betrayal again. Now let's get into the story. My wife and I were high school sweethearts. Back then, in high school, I was the guy who wasn't popular. In fact, I used to be bullied, which affected my personality a lot. On the other hand, my wife was famous in our school set, and almost everyone loved her, including me. The first time I got to talk to her was in a biology class, and we hit it off there. Unlike the other girls who didn't have my time, my wife was kind to me, and at some point, we started sharing lunch tables together. Fast forward to senior year, I summoned the courage to ask my wife out, and she said yes. She was my first real girlfriend, and that's how our relationship began. My wife and I were crazy about each other, and because of her unique character and popularity, we became one of the most famous couples in school. We were always together outside school, and our families loved and accepted us. As regular teenagers, we had our ups and downs. We broke up a couple of times, but still got back together. When we were done with high school, we applied for the same college, and luckily, we were both taken. Life for us was terrific. We grew and lived together, and we could explore so many things together, which was very beautiful for me. Eventually, after college, my wife and I got 2 great-paying jobs in our hometown, and we were happy to return. It was what we always wanted, and when we had that, we were so happy. My father told me it was great and noble to be with one woman and cherish what we shared, and I took his words to heart. From our teenage years and throughout our dating years, I never cheated on my wife or looked at another woman inappropriately. I loved my wife and didn't want anything to come between what we shared. When we returned to our hometown, people were still surprised we were together because they didn't believe we would last that long. Whenever we walked on familiar streets, we would see people look at us in awe, and that was a win for us, especially since they knew me as that show. A kid that could not look strangers in the eye while talking. After my wife and I settled down, we worked for almost a year in different organizations, and I proposed to her. She was thrilled when I did, and without wasting time, she said yes. Aside from verbally telling my wife that I loved her, it was evident from what I did for her. I gifted her a lot, especially after I started earning well. I got her nice clothes, shoes, jewelry, and books from her favorite authors. She loved reading romantic comedies, and I gave her something special on all our anniversaries and birthdays. I did all this because I loved her and wanted her to enjoy every moment she spent with me. Our love story continued smoothly as we planned our wedding, and eventually, we got married. Our wedding was neither big nor small, but it was terrific. All of our friends from high school who heard about our marriage attended, especially to see if it was true that my wife and I got married. After our wedding, we both moved into a new apartment I rented, and a year later, We had our first child, a boy. The birth of our son changed a lot of things for me, and it caused me to take life more seriously. With our son in our lives, I worked harder and ensured I was always there for my family. I made a lot of sacrifices, literally paused my life. And it was even more challenging for me because my dad fell ill around the same year my son was born. And I had to juggle between providing for my family and taking care of my ill father. Unfortunately, my father passed away when my son was 3 years old, which was one of my life's most challenging moments. After the birth of my son, my wife and I grew a little bit distant because she always had to take care of the baby. I was told it was expected, so I didn't take it to heart. I believed that after our baby could walk and maybe lessen the responsibility on my wife, we would get back to how we used to be if I was wrong. The older our son grew, the more distant we became. It got so bad that the only time we had a long conversation would be when she either complained about something or reminded me that I had to go grocery shopping or forgot to take out the trash. It was funny how we went from high school sweethearts who could not live without each other to a couple that always argued and fought. Despite all that was going on between us, I still loved my wife, and I treated her with so much love because I badly wanted us to return to how we used to be. I just believed she was having a hard time as a new mom and would get back to it with time. But I was wrong. One weekend, my wife and son visited her parents, and I was alone at home. I tried to sleep, but I couldn't because the thought of my wife didn't let me. So I got busy when I was tired of lying in bed. I cleaned the house, did the laundry, and I decided to clean the attic, too, since it was their last. While cleaning the attic and organizing things, I stumbled on a small box I didn't remember putting there. Out of curiosity, I opened the box and it was filled with letters. I was initially surprised because my wife barely went to the attic, and since I wasn't the one that put the box of letters there, it had to be her. At that point, all I wanted to know was the letters' purpose. As I read them, my heart skipped. On reading the first letter, I realized they were love letters my wife received from her lover, and I also found out that her lover was my high school bully, the same guy that used to publicly humiliate me. At first, I didn't believe what I had read because my wife knew how much I hated the same guy, and I would never imagine her cheating on me. But after I spent time going through all of the letters, I realized it was true. I was so heartbroken and shocked. I even found out that their affair started a couple of months after we moved back into town, and they had a couple of flings while we were still teenagers. I knew he was still in town. We had seen each other a couple of times, but I never spoke to him, and he never tried to either. He always had an annoying smirk, and it fueled my anger for him. The good thing was our high school reunion was just around the corner, and my wife and I were already making plans. We were actively involved in the planning committee because we were one of the few in town, so I took some of the letters and made plans to expose her and her lover. Also in some of the letters, I had seen my bully ask about my son, and I couldn't fight off the feeling that something else was happening. So when my son and wife returned, I acted like everything was cool, and since we weren't so close, she didn't notice anything different about me. I was so mad at her that I hoped my son was mine for her sake. To confirm my suspicion, I secretly took a paternity test, and the results showed that I had been raising another man's son all this while. This was the last straw that broke the camel's back for me. I wanted to throw her and her son out, but I wanted to do it more epically. D-Day eventually came. As you would think, my wife and I made a show. She acted like we were still madly in love with each other, and everyone had their eyes on us. As part of the plan, I was meant to give a speech and appreciate those who traveled from different parts of the country to attend our reunion, and while I made the speech, I told a story of a man who loved and cherished his wife, but she cheated on him with his enemy. I did that to instigate my classmates, and it worked. At the end of the story, I exposed to everyone that my wife was the person I was talking about. She was shocked, and everyone was shocked too. She pretended she didn't know who I was talking about, but I was smart enough to project copies of their letters. I had snapped, and everywhere was quiet for a while. Suddenly, one of my classmates who lived in our town too shouted at the top of her voice that was true, and everyone gasped. Well, it turned out that everyone from the planning committee knew my wife was having an affair with my bully, and no one mentioned it to me. But on that day, they took turns in confirming it. At the spot, my wife started to cry and beg me. She was already soiled in drinks from some of our angry classmates, and it pleased me to see them empty their drinks on her face. She thought I didn't know her lover was the father of the boy I was raising, but I also announced that I would be suing him for child support for all the years I took care of their son, and I left the party afterward. That same evening, I had my wife's and her son's stuff thrown out on our front lawn. I wanted to do that from the day I learned about her affair, but I had to wait. When I woke up the following day, it was all gone, and I knew she had come to take them. I divorced her so she could go and beat with her lover, and I also hired a lawyer that helped me in getting what I had spent. Finding out that my wife was cheating on me was my ultimate heartbreak. Till now, I have not been able to get over it. I poured my life into our relationship and marriage, but she betrayed me and destroyed everything. If I get married again, the first thing I'll do when my child comes is a DNA test. I can't handle this level of heartbreak twice.